The chain-link fence surrounding Northwood Elementary had long since surrendered to rust and rebellion, offering easy entry. Leo eyed the gap, then the hulking silhouette of the school beyond. Even in the bright, late-afternoon sun, the building seemed to absorb the light, its hundreds of blank windows like vacant eyes staring out into the overgrown field that had once been a playground. "Come on, Slowpoke," Chloe called, already halfway through the mangled fence, her backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. Her energy was stark, a very stark contrast to the oppressive stillness emanating from the school's ground. "It's not going to bite, yeah? Yet?" Leo sighed, adjusting his own heavier backpack laden with water bottles, flashlights, and basic first aid kits. A crowbar he felt slightly ridiculous carrying also. Easy for you to say, you're not the one who has to watch the documentary about scattered defending abandoned buildings with rusty pipes. "It's weird, okay? I wouldn't be all happy about going around here." Chloe snorted, pulling herself free from the fence with a rip of denim against the metal. "Relax. This place has been empty for what, 15 years now? Maybe 20? The only things here are the dust bunnies and bad memories. Besides," she grinned, her eyes sparkling with a thrill Leo both admired and dreaded, "isn't this the point?" He supposed it was. Northwood Elementary had been closed abruptly mid-semester 15 years ago or so. Official reports cited severe structural issues and asbestos contamination, but local legend painted a far darker picture. Whispers of unexplained disappearances, strange incidents involving staff and students, and an oppressive atmosphere that drove people away persisted. It was the perfect urban legend folder, the kind of place whispered about in hushed tones, dared upon by the teenagers fueled by boredom and bravado. For Leo and Chloe, now in their early 20s or so and nostalgic for the reckless adventures of their youth, it felt like one last potentially stupid hurrah. They crossed the cracked asphalt on the former parking lot, weeds sprouting defiantly through the fissures. The main entrance doors were boarded up with thick planks of weathered plywood secured with heavy bolts, but Chloe, ever so resourceful in her scouting days of their duo, had done her homework. She led Leo around the side towards the back of the building where the gymnasium used to be. Here, a single ground floor window was conspicuously missing its board. The glass shattered inwards long ago, leaving a dark, inviting area. "See? Piece of cake," Chloe whispered, peering into the darkness. The air drifting out carried a heavy scent, damp plaster, decay, stale air, and something else. Something faintly metallic and unpleasant. Leo shined his heavy-duty flashlight into the opening. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a section of what looked like a hallway. Tiles, buckled and stained, littered to the floor. There were even lockers lined on one wall, many hanging open like broken jaws, their faded paint colors, mainly blues and reds, evoking a ghostly echo of childhood. "After you," Leo offered, gesturing with his flashlight, his voice tighter than he intended. Chloe rolled her eyes but didn't hesitate. She swung her legs over the sill, landing with a soft thud on the debris below. She flicked on her own smaller flashlight, its beam dancing nervously across the walls. "Okay, coast is clear. No pipe-wielding maniacs in sight, I think." Leo took a deep breath, gripped his flashlight tighter, and followed her in. The transition from the warm sunlight outside to the cool, stagnant air within was immediate and a little unsettling. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps on unseen debris and the distant drip, drip, drip of water. They stood for a moment in the hallway, letting their eyes adjust. Graffiti, crude and unimaginative for the most part, marred the walls alongside peeling paint and water stains that looked like weeping wounds. Ahead, the hallway stretched into a deeper darkness, punctured by doorways leading into unseen rooms, all very dark. "Okay, explorer," Leo said, trying to inject some confidence into his voice. "Where do we go now?" Let's check out the main office," Chloe suggested. Here, see if we find any old records, maybe figure out why they really shut this place down. That'd be pretty cool. They moved cautiously down the corridor, their flashlight beams sweeping left and right. Every creak of the building, every rustle caused by a draft, finding its way through the broken panes, made Leo jump. He felt acutely aware of the sheer size of this place, the labyrinth potential of its corridors and classrooms. They were basically two small sparks of light in an ocean of decaying darkness, is what it felt like. The administrative wing was easy enough to find near the boarded-up main entrance. The door to the principal's office hung ajar, and inside chaos reigned. Filing cabinets were overturned, their contents spilled across the floor like entrails. Papers, yellowed and brittle with age, carpeted the room. A heavy wooden desk lay on its side, one leg snapped clean off. It looked less like vandalism and more like a scene of frantic, destructive panic. Whoa! Chloe breathed, stepping carefully over the mess. Somebody wasn't really happy with their detention slip. Leo knelt, picking up a damp, curled student record. The name was smudged, the photo a faded, generic school picture of a child who could have been anyone. He dropped it. A sudden chill, unrelated to the ambient temperature, traced its way up his spine. This feels wrong, Chloe. More than just kids messing around. Chloe didn't answer immediately. She was running her flashlight beam over the walls. Much of the plaster had crumbled away, revealing the lathe beneath. But in one corner, particularly obscured by a fallen bookshelf, was something else. Scratched crudely into the remaining plaster as if a sharp stone or a piece of metal were drawings. Not the usual graffiti tags, but unsettling, childlike stick figures with distorted limbs and wide, screaming mouths. They seemed to be running from a larger, amorphous shape, drawn with heavy, angry lines. Creepy, Chloe muttered, leaning closer. Looks like kids maybe drew these. Leo felt his stomach clench. Maybe we should stick to the main hallways. Don't be such a baby, Chloe retorted, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. This is what we came here for, isn't it? The weird stuff. She pursed herself away from the wall. Come on, let's see the classrooms. They left the ruined office, the image of the screaming stick figures lingering in Leo's mind. They ventured deeper, choosing a corridor lined with classrooms. The first few were predictable. Overturned desks, dusty blackboards bearing the faint ghost of erased lessons, textbooks decaying on shelves. The smell of mold was larger and stronger here. In the third classroom they entered, something felt a little bit different. The desks were arranged in neat rows, facing the front as if waiting for students who would never arrive. On the blackboard, written in surprisingly clear chalk, were the words, "Are you lost?" Leo and Chloe froze, their flashlight beams converging on the writing. Okay, Leo whispered, his voice barely audible. That's not old chalk. Chloe swallowed hard. Someone's messing with us. Like, I can't really explain anything else. Maybe explorers? Maybe? Who would write that? Leo argued, his fear solidifying into cold knots in his gut. How did they know we were here? A faint sound drifted down the hallway from the direction they'd come. A soft, melodic humming. It was disjointed, almost like a child's nursery rhyme, but distorted and a little off-key. Did you hear that? Chloe hissed, grabbing Leo's arm. He nodded, straining his ears. The humming faded as quickly as it had begun, leaving the oppressive silence rushing back into a fill of void. He swept his flashlight beam towards the classroom door, half expecting to see somebody standing there, but nothing. Okay, Chloe, let's get out of here, like now. No, wait, Chloe said, her curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. She pointed her flashlight towards the teacher's desk at the front of the room, Resting on its dusty surface was a small antique-looking wooden music box. It was intricately carved but coated in a thick layer of grime. Hesitantly, Chloe approached it. Maybe that's what we heard. This box, you see it? Don't touch it, Leo warned, but Chloe was already reaching out. Her fingers brushed the lid and, as if on cue, the humming started again. Louder this time, seemed to emanate directly from the box. It was the same discordant, unsettling tune. Chloe snatched her hand back as if burned. The humming stopped abruptly. Silence. Just dead silence now. Then, from further down the hall came a distant sound, the slow rhythmic creak of a swing set. Impossible. The playground was outside, separated from them by thick walls and distance. Okay, Chloe conceded, her face pale in the flashlight's glare. Okay, you win. Let's go. Back where we came. They backed out of the classroom, flashlights trained on the inert music box. They turned and hurried back down the corridor, their footsteps echoing unnervingly loud. The creaking sound had stopped, but the silence that replaced it felt charged. Watchful, perhaps. As they neared the junction leading back towards the shattered window, they entered through a heavy metal locker door. Just feet away from them, slammed shut with a deafening bang that reverberated through the hallway. Both of them cried out, stumbling backwards. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs so hard that he felt dizzy. He swung his flashlight wildly, the beam catching nothing but peeling paint and empty space. Someone is here, Chloe gasped, her voice trembling. Or something, Leo whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. They didn't wait to investigate. Panic lent them to speed up their feet as they scrambled back towards the administrative wing, towards the broken window, their only known way out. The air seemed to grow colder, thicker, pressing in on them. Leo risked a glance behind him, his flashlight beam cutting a swathe through the darkness. The corridor stretched back, empty and menacing, but just for a second at the very edge of the light, he thought he saw it. A flicker of movement, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper gloom, tall and unnaturally thin. He didn't look again. They reached the hallway by the shattered window, relief washing over them, Leo, in a dizzying wave. Freedom was just feet away. Come on, boost me up, Chloe said breathlessly, turning towards the opening. But the window wasn't empty anymore. A shape was silhouetted against the fading light outside. It was small, indistinct at first, resolving itself into a figure of a child, or what looked like a child. It was unnaturally still, its proportions slightly wrong, its head tilted at an awkward angle. It just stood there, framed in the jagged opening, blocking their only escape. Leo felt a scream building in his throat, cold and sharp. Chloe let out a choked gasp, fumbled with her flashlight, its beam wavering violently. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice high and thin. The figure didn't respond. In fact, it didn't even move. It just watched them, a small dark sentinel. Then, softly, carried on the stale air, came a humming, the same discordant tune from the music box. It seemed to be coming from the figure in the window. "No," Leo breathed. "No way." He grabbed Chloe's arm. "The gym! There might be another way out through there." They spun around, abandoning the blocked window, and plunged back into the school's oppressive darkness and embrace, heading towards the gymnasium annex at the far end of the building. The humming followed them, seeming to echo from the walls themselves, now a soundtrack to their terror. They burst through a set of double doors into the vast, cavernous space into the gymnasium. The ceiling soared high above, lost in a shadow. Faint light flickered through grimy high windows near the roofline. The wooded floor was warped and buckled in places. Deflated basketballs lay scattered like discarded husks, and folded bleachers lined one wall, coated in dust. "Look for an emergency exit," Leo yelled, his voice echoing strangely in a huge space. They swept the beams frantically across the walls, searching for a tall, tail red sign. An exit, anything. Chloe pointed out. There! On the far wall, particularly obscured by a pile of rotting floor mats, was a door marked with a faded exit symbol. They sprinted towards it, the sound of their pounding feet swallowed by the gym's immensity. The humming seemed to fade slightly here, replaced by the creaks and groans of the large structure. Leo reached the door first, grabbing the push bar. He shoved. It didn't budge. He shoved again, throwing his weight against it as much as he could. It was locked fast, or rusted shut, or barricaded from the outside. It won't open, he cried, panic clawing at him. Chloe slammed her fist against the unyielding metal. No, no, no! Suddenly, the main lights in the gymnasium flickered on, bathing the vast space in a harsh, buzzing, greenish-white glare. They blinked, momentarily blinded. The hum of the faulty fluorescent tubes overhead joined the building's chorus of unsettling sounds. And they weren't alone. Standing in the center of the basketball court, right on the faded mid-court line, was the child figure from the window before. It hadn't made a sound entering. It was just there. Under the stark lights, they could see it more clearly now. It wore clothes that looked like a faded school uniform, a pleated skirt, a stained white blouse. Its hair was lank and dark, obscuring most of its face, but its head was still tilted at that unnatural, broken doll angle. Its visible skin was pale, almost gray. It wasn't humming anymore, it was silent, watchful, watching their every move. Leo felt rooted to the spot, his breath trapped in his chest. Beside him, Chloe was trembling uncontrollably, shaking. Slowly, deliberately, the figure raised one hand. It pointed. Not at them, but towards the far end of the gym, where a set of double doors led back into the main school building, the direction they had just come from. What does it want? Chloe whispered, tears streaming down her face at this point. Leo didn't know, but the pointing felt like a command, a warning of some sort. Staying here felt infinitely worse than facing the known quarters again. The figure's stillness was more terrifying than any overt threat they've seen before. Then, from the doors the figure was pointing towards came a new sound, a scraping, dragging noise, heavy and slow like something's large and cumbersome being pulled across the floor. It was getting closer, I think. The figure on the court slowly lowered its hand. We have to go, Leo choked out, his survival instinct finally kicking in, overriding the paralysis of fear that had once taken him over. He looked around wildly. The bleachers! The bleachers! Maybe we can climb over them and find another window? He grabbed Chloe's hand, pulling her towards the folded stacks of seating against the wall. They scrambled onto the lowest tier, then began climbing, pulling themselves up the dusty, splintered wood. The scraping sound from the hallway grew louder and louder, and closer and closer. A heavy thud echoed as something hit the gymnasium doors. Then silence, the silence that they have known to come and understand ever since visiting this school. Leo and Chloe froze halfway up the bleachers, listening intently. The gymnasium lights flickered again, plunging them into momentary darkness before buzzing open again with life. In that brief moment of blackness, the figure on the court seemed to vanish. When the lights returned, the center court was empty. But the doors leading back into the school began to creak open, slowly, painfully, revealing not just the hallway they expected, but impenetrable darkness. And from that darkness, the scraping sound resumed, accompanied by a low, wet gurgling. Hide her, Leo urged, pulling Chloe upwards. They reached the top tier of the benches, pressing themselves against the cold, cinder-block wall of the back. They were 15, maybe 20 feet off the ground. High windows lined the walls near the ceiling, but they were barred and thick with grime. No escape here. The gymnasium doors were fully open at this point. The scraping stopped just inside the doorway. Something shifted in the profound darkness framed there. Leo couldn't make out a shape, only a sense of immense presence. Something that felt ancient and wrong. The gurgling sound intensified. Then, from the court below, the humming started once again, softly, the discordant nursery rhyme. Leo risked looking down. The child figure was back, standing directly below them, its head tilted unnaturally again and again and again, looking straight up at them. What little could he see of his face in the shadow of its hair was pale and featureless, except for a dark, ragged mouth that seemed stretched in a silent scream, or perhaps a smile. The figure raised its hand again, pointing, this time pointing directly at Leo. A wave of icy cold washed over him, so intense it felt like a physical blow. He felt a pull, a dreadful dizziness overwhelming him. He swayed, his grip on the dusty bleachers slipping. "Leo!" Chloe screamed, grabbing his shirt, pulling him back from the edge. The contact, her terrified voice, snapped him back into place. He clung to the bleachers, gasping. The figure below remained, pointing at Leo. The presence in the doorway seemed to shift, to gather itself. The air grew heavy, making it harder to breathe. "The other side," Chloe yelled, pointing across the gym. "Another emergency exit, identical to the one they tried. Maybe that one will work?" It was their only chance. The thing in the doorway hadn't fully emerged yet, and the child figure seemed rooted below them still. They didn't descend. Rather, they scrambled along the top tier of the bleachers, moving as quickly as possible along the narrow wooded plank. It felt agonizing, slow. Every creak of the wood under their weight seemed amplified 100 times. Leo didn't dare look down at the figure. He didn't dare look towards the horrifying darkness either. He kept his eyes fixed and distant on the exit sign. They reached the end of the bleachers nearest the second exit. Below them was a sheer drop to the gym floor. "We have to jump," Chloe said, her voice grim. Leo looked down. It was a long way, but the gurgling sound from the doorway was getting louder and louder. It was getting closer and closer. He almost could feel the malevolent attention shifting towards them. "On 3, he said, his voice shaking. 1, 2... He didn't wait for 3. He just squeezed his eyes shut and launched himself off the edge. He hit the warped floor hard, the impact jarring up through his legs and spine. Pain exploded in his ankle, but adrenaline surged through him. He pushed himself up, ignoring all the pain and agony he had just gone through. Chloe landed beside him a second later, stumbling but staying upright. "Go! Go!" They hobbled, half ran towards the exit door. Leo, leaning heavily on Chloe, he risked one last glance back. The child figure stood, unmoving below the bleachers, but the darkness from the doorway was spilling out now, coalescing into a towering, amorphous shape of shifting shadows, limbs that weren't limbs reaching, dragging itself across the gym floor towards them with agonizing slowness. The gurgling sound was horrific, wet and ragged. Leo slammed his hand against the push-bar exit door. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a screech of protesting metal, the door flew open, revealing a blessed sight of overgrown fields and the twilight sky above. They stumbled out into the cool evening air, gasping, collapsing onto the damp grass. Leo slammed the heavy door shut behind him as quickly as he could, though he knew it wouldn't latch. He didn't care, though. They were out. They lay there for several long moments, chests heavy, hearts pounding, listening to the sounds of the evening, crickets, distant traffic, blessedly normal sounds that they were used to. The oppressive silence and chilling noises of the school were contained behind the metal door. Leo's ankle throbbed mercilessly as the adrenaline begins to reduce. Chloe was crying silently, deep, shuddering sobs. Eventually, leaning heavily on each other, they limped back towards the mangled fence, casting fearful glances back at the dark, silent bulk of Northwood Elementary. No lights flickered in the windows. No figure stood watching. It looked just like an abandoned building once again. But they knew better. As they squeezed back through the fence, tearing their clothes again, Leo paused. Faintly carried on by the evening breeze, he thought he heard it. A tiny, discordant melody, the humming of a music box. He looked at Chloe, her eyes opened wide, fixed on the school. She'd heard it too. They didn't speak as they hobbled away down the darkened street, leaving the abandoned school and its terrible secrets behind them. But the silence between them was heavy, filled with the shared knowledge of what they had just experienced, the chilling proof that some places don't just hold bad memories. Rather, some places hold on to something far, far worse, and sometimes the ghosts of the past are not content to simply be remembered. Sometimes they reach out. Sometimes they follow you home. The faint, off-key humming seemed to echo in Leo's ears long after the school was out of sight, a permanent resident in the haunted corridors of his mind.